For the first time since 1996, the Office of Management and Budget has legislation to drive major change in federal IT. But FITARA is only part of a continuous focus on performance. Robert Haas says industry will need to get on board or be left behind in 2016. He sat down with our Diane Cho at the Vision Conference in Falls Church, Virginia.
Robert, you found that continuing resolutions are complicating investment planning. How so?
Agency planners, as well as the program managers themselves, need some level of consistency to make multi-year decisions when they're making their budgets and setting the plans for the next number of months, as well as into the future. And without that visibility, they don't know whether or not they can execute their plans as they originally designed them, or whether they're going to have to pare back, or whether they're even able to grow a little bit faster and deploy things a little bit faster. And that becomes important depending on the type of mission that they're supporting or the particular crisis they're trying to avoid.
What are some of the main issues that you've seen?
The timelines are often compressed into less than optimal time frames. The second thing is that they don't have visibility to provide the staff at the right times. And finally, the acquisition folks are challenged during boom and bust cycles that result from the inability to plan and forecast procurements.
According to your study, choosing between savings and value trade-offs is pretty difficult for agencies. So what does that mean?
Think about your home budget, for example. Maybe you would prefer to have a nicer car now and maybe have a new car, but you can't afford a new car, so you buy a used car that maybe breaks down a little bit more often. And that's sort of the trade-off that the agency planners are, and even some of their budget folks are having to make. They cannot always buy the new model, the one that is maybe at the forefront of technology, the one that might be a little bit better for them long term. They have to make do with what they have, and that's really the challenge and the trade-off that they've got.
CIO's top priorities are modernizing their IT infrastructure and cybersecurity, and if agencies spend more on those areas, what do they spend less on?
So that's the real challenge that they're faced with. Part of it is that they're hoping to retire some of these older systems. The second thing that they spend less on is coming through the acquisition reforms. You're starting to see consolidation of contracts, and particularly things like agency centralized software or laptop purchases, and you're starting to see those things, and I say starting to, over the last handful of years that's been occurring, but those savings are being taken and converted back into new program spend.
Going on to the budget, have we passed the inflection point? Is the IT budget going to grow over the next 5 years, do you think?
From our analysis, we believe that we have passed that inflection point. You really only know that looking backwards at the actual spend, but we believe, given the trend that we've seen through FY14 and FY15, and now our projections for FY16 and beyond, that we have passed that curve, and the data seem to indicate that, as well as some of the planning activities that we're starting to hear about within the government themselves, suggesting that the people inside the government believe that inflection point has passed as well.
Is there a difference between IT spending on the defense and civilian sides of government, or not really?
There is, and that has to do with a number of the pressures that each group of agencies faces. On the defense side, they've been pressured a lot because of the drawdown that we've seen over the last number of years. IT, along with the other portions of the defense budget, has been under a lot of pressure. Conversely, on the civilian side, we've seen a growth in the last number of years in the civilian spending, and that hasn't been present on the DoD side.
There are significant policy questions surrounding cloud adoption, mobility, big data, and the Internet of Things that remain unanswered. Is that a problem?
It is. From a technology adoption standpoint, there are a lot of promises that are being offered by those new technologies that you have, not the least of which is cost savings and flexibility and critical information sharing among users within the government and the public. The challenge is making sure that the trust of the government is maintained, and that the security of the information that is being shared isn't compromised. And so doing this in a deliberate fashion is at the core of the challenge that's faced by the decision makers. Are their security standards strong enough if they believe they're strong enough. Does everybody believe that they're strong enough because they're still liable for that data?
And of course, the $80 billion question here, how should companies plan for the year ahead?
Well, we believe that there's reason for cautious optimism. The government is, as we said, we believe it has turned the corner in terms of the bottom of the IT spending challenge. However, that doesn't mean that there's a lot of money out there. The government is trying to use its money judiciously, and from a planning perspective, companies really need to think about a handful of things. First of all, that the challenges faced from a fiscal environment are not just a 1 year or 2 year challenge, that they're going to be with us for the long term. The second issue is that the government has priorities in terms of spending from an acquisition standpoint. They're going to try to consolidate contracts. They are going to try to ensure that small businesses get a fair shake in the competitive environment, and there's going to be focus on also reducing non-performing contracts. So if you're impacted by any of those areas, you need to think about how that might affect your business. Finally, maybe the most important thing to think about is how are you providing value that enables the government to transform its operations and achieve its mission? Because that's going to be one of the biggest selling points over the next number of years.
All right, Robert Haas, thank you again for joining us on Government Matters.
Thank you very much.